Your generosity was the most dangerous thing about you. It is what guaranteed your betrayal. Jung mapped why the empath who gives everything is the one who gets betrayed. It was never generosity. It was a contract, and the proof is the part of you that has gone quiet. You poured yourself out for years, watched them walk away cold until who you used to be collapsed. By the end, you will understand why your giving keeps buying your betrayal. You will see what the rescue you keep performing was actually buying, and the price was always you. You will trace the pattern past this betrayal, back to the house where you first learned that love had to be earned through usefulness. You will meet the contract you signed before you had words to refuse it, and the heavy relief that hides underneath your grief. Because the hardest truth in Jung's psychology is this: the betrayal did not break a bond. It revealed a transaction you were too frightened to read. They did not take what you were keeping. They took what you were already giving away to anyone who would hold still long enough to receive it. You gave the benefit of the doubt long after the doubt had stopped being reasonable. You absorbed the emotional weather of the house, the moods that arrived without warning, the silences that needed decoding. You covered their blind spots so smoothly that no one else ever saw them. And you asked for almost nothing in return, because asking felt like a kind of weakness you had trained yourself out of years ago. You are drained down to something close to nothing now, and you keep running the autopsy convinced the answer was a quantity problem. If you had been more patient, more available, more willing to disappear into their needs, then maybe the ending would have rewritten itself into something kinder. But as you look back across the years, a colder realization works its way up through the grief. This is not the first time this has happened to you. It is the third time, or the fourth. The faces change. The details rearrange themselves. The particular cruelty takes a new shape each time, and underneath all of that variation, the ending is identical. The only constant in every one of those endings is you. That recognition is the moment most people slam the door shut, because the alternatives both feel unbearable. Either the universe has singled you out for punishment, or you have been quietly arranging your own ruin. Carl Jung mapped the psychological architecture of this loop almost a century ago, and he would not let you escape into either of those stories. He would tell you that what remains unconscious in a person does not stay politely in the basement, it runs the house. By the end of this, you are going to understand the precise mechanism behind why your giving keeps guaranteeing your betrayal. You will see what the rescue you keep performing was actually purchasing, because it was buying something, and the price was always you. But the part Jung would ask you to sit with is harder than the betrayal itself. The help was never only help, and the proof of that is the part of you that has gone silent now, the part that will not give any more and feels strangely unbothered about it. You believe your generosity is clean. When you trace your own motives, you land on the same sentence every time. I just wanted to help. And you mean it. The feeling is real, the impulse is immediate, and it arrives faster than thought. But underneath that sentence, running silently the whole time, is an invoice. You do not write it consciously. You would be ashamed to. Yet it is itemized with great precision, and you present it for payment at the exact moment the other person fails to recognize everything you gave. Jung described a pattern he saw again and again in people who organize their lives around rescuing others. The compulsion to save, to fix, to carry, very often is not the overflow of a full heart. It is a defense built against the person's own helplessness. If you are the one who heals, you never have to feel how unhealed you are. If you are the one holding everyone up, you never have to notice that no one is holding you. Jung had a phrase for the shadow side of this, the helping hand that secretly enslaves. The help arrives wrapped in warmth, and a hidden motive of power rides inside it. Not power as domination, power as the guarantee that you cannot be left. This is where the mask comes in, and Jung was unsparing about the mask. He wrote that through the persona a man tries to appear as this or that, to fit the slot society hands him. But the danger is that they become identical with their personas. That is the whole trap in a single line. The persona begins as a useful costume. You play the reliable one, The strong one, the person who can be counted on when everyone else falls apart. The role gets rewarded. People relax around you. They hand you their chaos because you have shown you will hold it. And slowly, without any single decision, the costume fuses to the skin. You stop being a person who sometimes helps and become a function called helping. There is no longer a you behind the role to come home to. You have felt the evidence of this fusion in a specific and unsettling way. Put yourself in a room where for once, nobody needs anything from you. No crisis to manage, no mood to stabilize, no problem with your name on it. By every reasonable measure, you should feel relief. Instead, a low, creeping panic starts up in your chest. You do not know what to do with your hands or your attention. You realize, with something close to vertigo, that you do not actually know how to exist in a room where you are not solving something. That panic is not a character flaw. It is the ego discovering it has no ground to stand on apart from the persona. Take away the helping, and there is a frightening blank where self should be. So the uncomfortable truth is not that you gave too much. It is why you gave. You did not give because you were simply good, though you are capable of goodness. You gave because being needed was the only form of safety you ever learned to trust. Somewhere far back, you worked out that a person who is indispensable does not get discarded. So you bought your right to occupy space in the room, every room, by making yourself impossible to do without. The generosity was real. It was also a premium you paid again and again on a policy against abandonment. And when a structure like that finally shatters, when the person you made yourself indispensable to leaves anyway, you are forced to ask a question you have spent your whole life avoiding. If you are not the one who fixes, who holds, who saves, then who exactly are you? But this, as Jung would insist, was never really about them. She is about a third of the way into understanding it now. She has stopped staring at the most recent betrayer, the ex-partner, the friend who took and then went cold. She has started tracing the line backward, past that relationship and the one before it, past the pattern itself, until the line runs straight out of adulthood and into a particular house. And there she is, 7 years old, small, with a kind of radar most children never have to develop. She can read the front door before it fully opens, can tell from the weight of the footsteps and the quality of the quiet which version of the parent has come home tonight. She has learned to adjust herself in advance, to become whatever the room requires before the room even asks. When she manages the mood well, the house stays calm and she gets to feel, for an evening, something that resembles love. When she misreads it, the temperature drops, so she gets very, very good at reading it. She learns the equation that will run the rest of her life without her consent. Love is not given. Love is earned through usefulness, through vigilance. Jung saw this with total clarity, even if the clinical vocabulary we now use for it did not yet exist in his time. He wrote that every analysis carried out at all thoroughly shows this regression, that the person under pressure regresses still further back to the childhood relationships. The deepest layer of it is the relationship to father and mother. He called the inner template left behind by those early years the parental imago, not the actual parent, but the imprint of the parent, the master pattern of how love is supposed to be obtained. And here is the cruelty of it. The imago does not age. The woman tracing this backward is 45, but the program she is running was written by a 7-year-old, and it has never been updated. This is why the same somatic dread keeps showing up. She has felt the precise anxiety of managing her partner's volatile moods, the tight breath, the over-attentive scanning, the sense that the floor could tilt at any second, and one day she recognizes it. It is the identical bodily anxiety she felt tiptoeing across the kitchen at 7. The nervous system never filed those two experiences as separate. To it, they are the same event, occurring across a 38-year gap. The body is not confused. It is doing exactly what it was trained to do, treating attunement to a dangerous adult as the price of survival. So the takers who came later did not pick the lock on her life. There was no lock to pick. They simply walked through a door that had been propped wide open for decades, and they did the natural thing a taker does when they find an open door and a person inside who is confused being drained with being loved. What looked like her great virtue, her bottomless empathy, was in its origin a survival strategy, a child's brilliant, costly adaptation to an environment where the price of being loved was the erasure of her own needs. Your empathy may be a trauma response wearing the costume of a virtue. The person who betrayed you did not invent this dynamic. They stepped into a void that was shaped with terrible precision to fit them. The relationship breaks, the grief comes first, and it is real, and it lasts a while. But then, underneath the grief, in a place you are almost afraid to look, something else arrives that you were not expecting and do not feel allowed to name. Relief. Not a small flicker of it either, but a deep, heavy, full-body relief. The kind that comes when you set down a weight you have been carrying so long you forgot it was optional. You were finally released from the impossible, unpaid labor of keeping another person's entire reality intact. And almost immediately, the people around you begin to comment. They tell you that you have changed. They say it carefully, or they say it with an edge, but the message underneath is the same. You have become harder, colder, something worse than you used to be. You stopped over-explaining yourself. You stopped rushing to soften every refusal. You let a silence sit instead of filling it with reassurance. To people who knew the old you, the endlessly available you, this reads as a kind of damage. What they are actually watching is a return. Jung would frame what is climbing out of that grave as the shadow, the part of the personality you were never permitted to live. For most people, the shadow holds their aggression, their selfishness, the impulses polite society asks them to bury. But for the compulsive giver, the contents are inverted. And this is the part the standard story never tells you. If your whole life was organized around absolute compliance, around saying yes before the question finished, around being endlessly soft and available, then what got exiled to the shadow is the exact opposite. Your shadow does not hold cruelty. It holds your right to say no. It holds your healthy self-interest, your capacity to want something purely for yourself without apology. And it holds the resentment, years of it, decades of it. If you have felt that relief underneath the grief and been ashamed of it, understand that the relief was never coldness. It was the first honest signal from a part of you that spent decades silenced. There is a parallel process happening underneath all of this, and Jung named it as the real work. He wrote that the supreme aim of the psychological project is conscious realization, and the first step is to make oneself conscious of contents that have hitherto been projected. For years you projected something onto the person who took from you. You projected potential, a misunderstood soul, a wounded inner child who only needed enough patience and love to finally become who they really were. You rescued that projected image with everything you had. And the reason you rescued it so desperately out there is that rescuing it inside yourself was forbidden. The wounded child you kept trying to save in them was your own. So watch what happens at the moment the projection finally drops. The illusion does not shatter with drama. It goes flat, cold and flat, like a screen switching off. One day you look at this person and you no longer see the misunderstood soul with the buried gold inside. You see an adult who made a series of clear choices to use you and who would make them again. This is the precise instant you become unreadable to the people who used to operate you. The buttons are still there on the panel, but they no longer connect to anything inside you. So the something worse everyone keeps warning you about is not a new cruelty you picked up. It is simply you, finally in possession of your own fangs, able to keep something for yourself instead of giving it away the moment it formed. You did not become worse. You became whole, and whole is harder to use. But the shadow you have taken back arrives carrying a severe and immediate temptation, and this is the part you were not supposed to survive into. She is sitting inside her new boundaries, and for the first time in her life, they hold. She says no, and the sky does not fall. She declines to rescue, and the guilt, which used to be deafening, is only a faint hum she can ignore. From the outside, this looks like victory, and in part, it is. But watch where the energy goes once it is no longer pouring outward into other people, because energy that's strong does not evaporate. It turns into a lens. She starts seeing manipulation everywhere, and the thing is, she is often right. Her radar, the one she built at 7, was always accurate. Now she has aimed it at the whole world and turned the gain up to maximum. She sorts people quickly and permanently into 2 bins: users and victims, predators and prey. She catches the angle behind the kind gesture, the ask hidden inside the compliment. Jung had a name for this swing, and he treated it as one of the genuine dangers of waking up. He called it enantiodromia, the tendency of any extreme to eventually convert into its own opposite. The person who gave without limit does not heal by finding the middle. Under pressure, they fire across to the far pole and become the person who trusts no one at all. And it feels like wisdom from the inside. It wears the face of being finally awake, too sharp to be fooled again. But Jung's warning is exact. He wrote that the only person who escapes the grim law of enantiodromia is the man who knows how to separate himself from the unconscious. The closed fist feels like strength, but it is not separation from the wound. It is the wound still running the show, just from the opposite direction. The old you was operated by the fear of being abandoned, so you gave everything. The new you is operated by the fear of being used, so you give nothing. In both versions, the fear is holding the controls. You have not climbed out of the machine, you have just reversed its polarity and called the reversal freedom. And there is a quieter cost underneath the loneliness, the one Jung worried about most. He called it the inflation of the awakened ego. When you decide that you alone see clearly, a cold superiority creeps in and takes up residence. Here is the trap stated without any softening. If you decide that everyone is a taker, then the people who broke you are still the ones drawing your blueprint. They dictated your shape when you gave everything, and they dictate it now that you give nothing. She is most of the way through it now, and the change shows up in an ordinary moment rather than a dramatic one. She meets someone new, and within a short time, because her radar was always real and she has stopped apologizing for it, she sees their shadow clearly. She does neither. She does not lunge in to rescue the wound. She also does not turn and run from it. She does a third thing, and the third thing is the entire point. She observes it. She names it to herself, calmly and without alarm, and then she holds her boundary in place and lets that person carry their own weight, watching, without rushing in to lift it for them. She stays warm and she stays separate at the same time. 2 things she was always told could not coexist. This is what Jung pointed toward as the resolution, and he reached for the language of alchemy to describe it. You are not asked to kill the empath in order to be safe. You are not asked to become the predator you finally learned to see. You are asked to hold both capacities at the same time, in the same body, without letting either one swallow the other. The sensitivity that reads the wound and the boundary that refuses to bleed into it. When you reach that third position, the entire landscape of your relationships changes, and it does not change back. The takers lose their grip, not because you put up a wall, but because you stop supplying the projection they were feeding on. The genuine people draw closer because warmth offered from a person who could withhold it is worth incomparably more. Your yes finally means something, because your no is now real and available. A gift only counts when refusal was a live option. So the sovereign giver is not a colder version of the old you, and not a warmer version of the cynic. It is a genuinely new configuration. You keep the generosity, all of it, the depth and the attunement and the willingness to see people clearly, and you reclaim the gate. You decide who passes through and how much, and on what terms, and you stop performing on the people around you the rescue you were always forbidden to perform on yourself. Jung did not map this loop to absolve you, and he did not map it to harden you. Both of those are escapes, and he had no patience for escapes. The empath who gives everything was never first betrayed by the people who took You were betrayed earlier than that by a contract you signed before you had any words to refuse it, in a house where you learned that the only safe way to be loved was to make yourself useful enough to keep. That contract is void now, not because you forgave it and not because you avenged it, but because you finally read it all the way to the bottom in full daylight. And a contract you can read is a contract you can refuse. So if you have felt that heavy shift from the mask of the giver to the quiet of the sovereign, name it where someone else who is living it can see it. Write this in the comments. I kept the gift and reclaimed the gate. Because the empath who learns to do both is the one the takers can no longer read.
Turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.